So far we have done graphing basic sine and basic cosine. We've graphed sine and cosine with various amplitudes, and we've graphed a little bit of sine and cosine with reflections over the x-axis. The next thing we're going to talk about today in this video, and I'm also going to make a second video, I'm going to take this worksheet and split it in half. So I'm going to do the odd problems on this video and the even problems on the next one. We're going to change the period. So we're going to change the frequency with which the sine and cosine curves repeat. In a normal sine or cosine graph, the period is 2 pi. When you have an equation, such as the ones up on the top here in the notes, that say y equals cosine bx or y equals sine b of x, the period is 2 pi divided by the absolute value of b. Now I am going to stress the absolute value part because if b is a negative, that actually has to do with a reflection over the y-axis, not the period change. So just be aware, whatever the b value is, you want the absolute value of it and to take 2 pi divided by that. So as I said, I'm going to go ahead and do the odd graphs, so 1, 3, 5, and then I'll do a separate video with the even graphs. So if I take a look at problem number 1 here, we've got cosine of 4x. So first thing I do, and this is my own little notes to self, I'm going to make a note for the amplitude and I'm going to make a note for the period. Amplitude is 1. Coefficient here is 1. It's not written, but mathematicians were lazy and we just didn't write it there. It is there though. The period is, well, there's a 4 here in front of that x. So for the period, we're going to take 2 pi divided by 4, and the period's going to be pi over 2. So what's happened here is the normal period is 2 pi, but we're going to complete an entire cycle in pi over 2. So we've compressed the graph closer to the y-axis, or basically within one normal period, we're now going to see 4 cycles of the graph. So we've sped it up. So period is pi over 2. So on the x-axis, I'm going to put the pi over 2 here. Okay, so this is 1, 2, 3. This is my 4th space out. Now I'm going to take this pi over 2 and chop it in half. So half of pi over 2 is pi over 4. Half of pi over 4 is pi over 8. And then to find the third interval here, I'm going to take the first one, which is pi over 8, and multiply it times 3. So 3 pi over 8. Now, if you're not a huge fan of putting the values here, you can also, I'm just going to loop these, you can also label the bottom, and if you want to keep them out of the graph entirely so it's easier for you to see the curve, that's totally up to you. I'm not going to care one way or another, and in fact, you'll probably see me doing both depending on the graph. All right, so I've got the period labeled. Let's go ahead and talk about cosine here. Cosine is going to start off center on the positive. So we're going to start at 1. We would also have a minimum of -1. So let's go ahead and start at 1. We're going to go to 0 at pi over 8, -1 at pi over 4, back to 0 for 3 pi over 8, and then return to where you started from, which is 1. So go ahead and draw the curve. Now, my curves, guys, I've done these for a long time, so I have a pretty decent, my curves are decent. Not perfect, but they're okay. Practice with it. If you're working with your iPad, delete it a few times if you're not a big fan of the way it looks. You also can do the curve in pieces, so you don't have to make it one curve. Whoops. You could actually just draw this little piece right here, come in and draw this one, then draw this next little section, and finally draw the last section. It's up to you. So that's problem number 1, and it is done. Okay, we've labeled everything. Yes. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and slide down to number 3 here. Still have a cosine curve. This time our amplitude is 4, and our period, well, we're going to take 2 pi and divide by the b value, which is 3. So 2 pi over 3, that can't be reduced. We're just going to leave it as 2 pi over 3. All right, so 2 pi over 3. If I want to do half of that, that would be just, well, pi over 3. Half of that's pi over 6. And if I triple that, that would be 3 pi over 6. Well, 3 over 6 is just pi over 2. All right. So play around with those a little bit. You kind of get used to it. And like I said, my way, another teacher showed it to me. It's take your period, chop it in half, triple it. That's worked for me for years now to find those critical values on the x-axis. Critical value on the y-axis, I need a maximum of 4 here and a minimum of -4. That's what we're going to oscillate between. Cosine here is going to start off center in the positive direction. We're going to drop down to 0, down to the minimum of -4, back to the midline of 0, and then up to +4. And do your best to draw a curve here that is not a V for victory, all right? So make sure it has a curve to it. The other thing to keep in mind is that these ends where you come up to the maximums here, remember this curve is going to keep curving and waving. So this maximum point is going to come back down, and this maximum point is going to come back down. I've seen students in the past, as I drop my Apple Pencil there, I've seen students in the past take the curve at the end and do like this, where they say it's going off to infinity. Do not do that, okay? Yes, the curve continues forever, but not in that direction. So don't put an arrow on it. We know when we're graphing these, we're just graphing one period or one cycle, so that's okay. All right, sliding down to number 5 here. Let's see what all fun stuff we have going on. Okay, so we've got 3 different things. We've got that negative. We'll need to deal with that 3, and then we have a 6 in front of the x. So if we start with the negative, that's going to be a reflection over the x-axis. The 3 is going to be my amplitude. So amplitude is 3, and period, well, we're going to take 2 pi over 6. If I simplify that, that would be pi over 3. All right, so that's going to be my critical value here at the end, pi over 3. Half of that would be pi over 6. Half of that would be pi over 12. If I triple pi over 12, that's going to be pi over 4. So let's go ahead and label the, that was the x-axis, label the y-axis. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, -3. All right. Normal cosine would start off center positive. Because we're reflecting over the x-axis, we're going to start off center negative. So we're going to start at -3 here to the center at 0. Let's go up to 3 to 0 and then -3, which is where we started with, and draw the pretty little curve. All right, so those are the odd questions from this note sheet. If you've got any concerns about period changes, amplitude changes, reflections over the x-axis, all these questions were in terms of cosine, so I'm sure the other questions are in terms of sine. We'll get to those. But if you do have questions or concerns, please let me know so we can help you out.